welcome back to Ready Nerd Go, Graphic Policy's tabletop RPG adjacent podcast series. My name's Alex, this is Enko,
Hello.
and welcome to episode 7 of the show. Eagle-eared listeners may notice that this sounds a bit more rehearsed, and we may be a bit more aware of what we're saying than than the last couple of episodes, or even the next couple of episodes. The reason for that is that your intrepid host, me, somehow forgot to record the first time we did episode 7, and consequently, we know that episode 8 and 9 is a hot mess of us just riffing on shit and having a great time doing it.
Yep.
Episode 7, because we were talking about dice and the different types, etc. We have all of the notes that we did talk about, so we're going to recap those,
And
mostly because we had a lot of fun doing it, but also because dice are kind of integral to tabletop RPG games for the most part, and we probably should circle back and talk about it. So if you are listening to this out of order, I think that as we're recording, episode 6 is came out last week. So we have actually recorded 8 and 9 already. 9 just half an hour ago,
yep.
40 minutes ago. Episode 7, therefore, is out of order. 8 and 9 wanted to go first because, 7, 8, 9, but I'm dumb.
Oh.
Yeah, I couldn't not. Now, I don't know how they're being released, which is going to be kind of funny. So, if you're listening, what are you talking about? You released episode 6. Now we're listening to episode 7 because Brett is smart and knows how to do things in order,
The
unlike
magic
us.
of editing.
Exactly. Now we have completely not removed the curtain for this. So to to get things started, I don't remember how I initially opened the question on the first recording, but we were talking about different types of dice. Now, can I just buy a single set and be done with it? Like, do I need to care about what kind of dice I use?
Well, I mean, technically speaking, you don't actually need to buy dice at all. There's plenty of free and functional apps you can download on your phone that will simulate any form of die rolling you need. Having said that,
That was
generally
not what we talked about last time, and I don't have that in the notes. God damn it. Anyways.
I was gonna say I'm really curious to see how much, like, because normally you go into these with no information whatsoever, but we've talked about this before. So how much do you remember, sir?
quite a bit, ironically. Now, the funny thing is, this was recorded probably, 2 months ago? The last episode 7, just with the way
Yep.
our schedules have aligned. In those last 2 months, I have become an absolute dice goblin. So I have way more.
Yes. And we even talked about that in that episode of, it's like normally you buy like one set and you play with that for a little bit, but then eventually another set catches your eye and it's like,
Yeah,
oh, that's so pretty. And at the time you had owned like a couple of dice sets, but like
I
nothing serious. And since
I I
then,
had I had 6 sets, and the
yeah.
reason I had 6 was because I bought 3 because we were using multiple of the same, like multiple D6, and we will get into this properly, folks. This is us just
Being us.
shit, being us. And I'd lost the bag with my 3 sets, and I'm like, oh, for God's sake! Now working in the comics, I'm like, you know whatever. I'll grab these 3, and I started using them as like, I'm just going to pay for them before I accidentally take them home and whatever, because it would be so easy to do when you're not paying attention. Just grab a set you were using.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if we typically lend out dice to play at the table. Usually we don't. I just
No.
decided to take advantage of the fact that I worked there and I was going to do it. I did end up paying for them within about 5 minutes because I realized that I was going to end up taking them home anyway if I like them. So I have 2 sets of 3 that are very similar in aesthetics because I like that style. Now, I had no idea that you could use a virtual set. It does make sense given that you can get random number generators, which is effectively all that a virtual set would be.
Yep.
I personally feel like I wouldn't like a digital set of dice, but obviously I'm also a physical book reader and tend to avoid e-reader. So
I
that's probably a personal thing.
I used I used digital dice rollers right around when they first saying hit mainstream is not accurate because this hobby has barely ever been known about in the mainstream.
I was gonna
But
say saying it hit the mainstream. Like, what? So you're using it 2 years ago when Stranger Things came out with Eddie?
when, when digital die rollers hit the mainstream of the hobby. So I used them for a little bit, but then ultimately went back to dice just because I love my shiny math rocks.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I do think I know we are going, despite having our, the last time we recorded this, we have all those nice show notes that we were intending on following through. Now we're going off the
We
cuff again. That's just what we
Yeah,
do.
we're gonna try because I don't want to have to readjust the show notes, so we're gonna stick mostly to them.
Well,
Folks, if you're reading the show notes along with us as you're listening, and you didn't talk about that, it's because I can't keep Anko on topic, and I can't keep myself on topic half the time. So
no. But
bear
one
with us.
thing I did want to touch on because you mentioned it in passing a couple of times, and for newer folks, I want to make sure they're aware. When you say a set of dice, generally what we're talking about is the quote unquote traditional RPG set, which is the platonic solids plus a couple of extras. You got your D20, your D12, yeah, your 2D10 for rolling percentile, your D8, your D6, and your D4. Dice notation, when I'm saying D6, I'm saying like a D6 is a standard six-sided die, like you'd find in like Monopoly or something. So a D20 is a die set that has 20 sides on it. Numbers go 1 to 20.
The
Uh,
irony of you remembering to say that when I think the last time we said that immediately makes me proud of us. We've come a long way.
yeah, and now
Now,
different
you
systems will use different sets, but we can
we
get to
we
that whenever it
we
comes up
actually
in the
will be.
show
Yeah,
notes.
that's going to be coming up. So you mentioned you can get free die online, virtual dice, and
Yes.
regardless of your opinion, you don't have to spend money on them.
No.
However, if you're looking to get a set of, and folks, for the rest of this conversation, when I say a set of die, if I'm not pre or pre-qualifying what kind of set, I specifically mean the set Anko has just brought up, the D20, 12, 10, 10, 6, and 4. How much do you need to spend on a set?
Well, ironically, this is a point of conversation that you would probably know a lot better than I would because you sell the damn things.
Yes, this is
But
true.
generally speaking, like a low end set will be like somewhere between like $12, $20. But you can get sets that are made out of like ivory and metal or like resin cast with specific features on them that you can like there's a metal set there that I think is what 60 some dollars.
Mm, oh, okay. So you can get sets for $6. We're talking Canadian dollars because we are both Canadian,
Yes.
and ironically live in Canada. We do sell a set. It's a plain. I think they're like just very plain die, not unlike what you get in a Monopoly set, like white with black numbers, or may even be pink with black numbers, or whatever. Just a very standard single color set of die. They're about $6. You can get a set or two sets for less than $12, 12, $15 quite easily, depending on where you go. However, as Anko said, you can get metal die, and we have a set of. We actually have two sets. I lied. We have about four sets of metal die at the shop,
Just got more
and
in.
yeah, and so one of them is, in my mind, very plain, very boring. It's just
Hmm.
dull metal with black inlay numbers in them. That might be fine for a lot of people. They might like that. If I'm going to spend $45 on a set of dice, it's not going to be on that. Whereas we also have a set. I think they're die hard dice, and they are metal with like black inlay and that actual design in them, and they look pretty good. And then we also have, and this is something that we will probably touch on because this wasn't in the original recording because we didn't have them at the time. Mystery dice bags. I would say I have probably bought at least four of these because I love mystery bags, and this is just speaking to my inner nerddom. Now, in this set, in this mystery bags, there are metal die in them. They are 45 Canadian. I think that I don't even know who makes them. I have to. My dice bag is downstairs, and I still have a package in there. But they are the metal die in there. We sold a set, so I guess we have about three sets left in the store right now. We sold a set, and they were gold enamel die with black designs in them. They look really nice.
Oh, they're so pretty.
And the other set, we don't know what they look like, and we won't know until someone buys them and opens them in the store.
Hopefully they'll actually open them in the store, not just buy and walk out with them. Cause like, no, come back.
No, yeah, like the people that bought the last set were there and were like, oh, we really want to open them. Like, we want you to open them, and you were there behind the counter, you just at the counter, and you span around. The owner came flying over, and the three of us are there just waiting for them to open the die. It's a great time. It was good fun.
Hmm.
Now, you don't need to spend and that $50 on a set of dice. You don't.
No.
You can again spend less than 10 on a set of dice. You can, however, spend money on die when if you're like, you know what, I do want a second set, and I'm case in point myself. I kind of want a different set. So I, aside from the random ones I get that I just find a fun, because it's a mystery thing, and I enjoy that. I have I seem to enjoy purple, blue, grey, black resin swirly die. I don't know why that's what I tend to go for, but that's the kind of colors I go for. And if you look at my dice bag, you can say, oh, I can clearly see what if I was going to get you a set of dice for a present, I can clearly see what kind you enjoy.
Yeah, and well, me, I tend to prefer the more. I like to call them gummy dice because they kind of look like gummy candies. They're like the semi-translucent colored ones that they look like gummy candies, and I love the look of them. And most of my dice tend to fall along that line because that's what I prefer.
My
Or
wife would call
I
those
like the
eatsy
sparkly
dices
ones.
because you look at it like, oh, candy. We've Her and I have had this conversation before when it comes to different like game pieces from board games. I'm like, is that an eatsy piece? She's like, yes, it is. And you can just see her thinking like, if that was candy, I'd be all over that. And I agree. There are definitely games where you look at a play piece or a gummy die and you think, yep, I would. If I was hungry or high or drunk or whatever, I could easily start eating that. And I understand why children eat game board pieces, board game pieces, whatever.
Yeah.
All right, so we've established you can spend anywhere from nothing to $50 plus on a set of die. They don't have to necessarily. They can look however you want, right? Like you like a gummy piece, a translucent set. I like the swirly set. Some people like solid colors. Others like things that dice that have things in them. Like you can get sets with like a resin piece with things in them. And again, some you can get relatively cost effective. I think that we sold a set for 15 to $20. Ironically, it was one of the mystery sets, and it came out with blue and red toadstools in, and it was fantastic, and we were all super excited for them. But you don't need that. You don't have to have that. So the next note I have is on misbehaving dice and urban legends, and I was going to tie this into the reason some of us have more than one set is because sometimes dice just you need a change.
Yeah. It's it's not as prevalent nowadays, but especially like when I was playing as a kid and the internet was a relatively new thing or didn't exist yet, and that makes me feel old to say. But
Yeah.
it's people would have all of these different ideas about why dice would roll badly or what you should do when dice roll badly or how to make dice roll better. Like the one that I remember that I didn't really believe as a child. I say child, I was a teenager, but I didn't really believe, but I did anyway, just on the off chance. Is do you remember that myth that glass tends to get like thicker at the bottom because it's not
Hmm.
actually a solid, like slowly like shifts down because of
Yeah.
gravity? people believed that about their dice. So, you would train them by always having the highest facing number on top. That way the dice would settle and be like trained to roll the higher number more often. And
That
I don't
is
know. I don't know if it was the urban
fascinating.
legend part of me or if that was just the little neurodivergent part of my brain going, everything needs to be organized. But, that one came up a lot.
Yeah, that's fair. I do recall us talking about this before, and we were saying how people will put their dice on timeout, etc. And I
Hmm.
I find it amusing that a lot of not a lot, but there are definitely some D&D and tabletop RPG players who are very superstitious about their die,
Oh, yeah.
like unbelievably superstitious. And yet, if you talk to them about religion, like that's horseshit. I don't believe in it in any of that. And I find that fascinating that you can be remarkably superstitious and yet absolutely undeniably firm in your atheistic beliefs,
God isn't real, but don't touch my dice or you'll steal the luck from them.
right? It's that regardless of what your beliefs are, to me that I find that amusing that you have to that you think luck is a tangible thing, and I
Yeah.
think it's a fascinating subject to explore in terms of more of a psychological thing that I don't think we're equipped to talk about. However, I so you were told you were giving me an example of people putting their dice on timeout, and I have the anecdote to share this time.
Ooh.
When ironically enough, the couple that bought the two pairs of dice, the filled dice and the metal dice
Mm.
that we looked at, they were saying how he is really superstitious on die, and he has had he's got so many different sets where she only has the one. She's like, they're a great set. It's all I need. It's the only set I really need to play, so that's what I play with. If I need, like, she has a couple that she might need if she uses more than one specific type, so 2d6s, etc.
Yeah.
Whereas he had said, "Yeah, I rolled a low three times in a row on this set, and I realized that they were shit sets, so I threw them out." And she was like, "I was so mad at him. That was a good set of dice." I'm like, I understand. I understand sometimes it's a psychological thing of I have just rolled low four times on this set. I'm gonna change it. So even if it doesn't make a difference, it's gonna make me feel better.
Yeah, it
I
gives you that
understand the
clean
logic of that.
mental break.
Yeah. I would just put them back in the bag. I wouldn't necessarily throw them out because I'm rolling terribly and these inanimate objects have no control over this.
I've had players fire them across the room. I've had players, in one memorable instance, grab a hammer and actually just smash the thing.
I feel like people like that might need anger management classes.
Oh, yeah, that's not a question.
Yeah.
But at the same time, firing a die across the room, I haven't done it. I have come very close when I'm playing, a very high tension, high emotional game, and the dice are just not working for me. The
I
feeling gets there.
I don't get me wrong, like I make the joke, but I understand the raw emotion that comes when you're in an intense moment and whatever it is you fail and you have that frustration that you want to let out. Throwing a die is, in my mind, significantly less in less indicative of needing some kind of anger management classes or chat or coping mechanism than having to, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to get up. I'm going to go to my garage or my basement, find a hammer, come back down and smash these die. At some point in that process,
Yeah.
you should have had enough time to, okay, breathe. Throwing a die across the room is that immediate reaction of, I've had enough. And you throw it like, oh, I've got to go pick it up. It's why, as adults, we might want to smash things and why rage rooms are so fantastic. Because if you smash a plate, like, yes, I've let the anger out. Well, now I've got to clean it up. And now I'm annoyed that I've smashed a plate.
Yeah.
At least in a rage room, you don't have to clean it up. And that's what you're paying for. All right. So we talked about misbehaving dice and urban legends. Do you I'm going to deliberately switch these. So if you're looking at the notes and you're wondering about what I'm did I miss something I didn't, you've talked. I think you actually brought this up, and the line is, quote, "You're stealing my luck."
Yeah. So there's people in general don't tend to understand statistics and like probability too well. and
Yeah.
and I've genuinely had friends who I know are very smart people. One of them is currently in university studying engineering, tell me with a straight face that because he rolled a 6 on his d6, he's not going to be able to roll a d6 again because he's already rolled that number.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of like when you're getting into luck and numbers rolling high. I already mentioned one of them earlier. Like you said, like there's players who will not let you anywhere near their dice because they're convinced
It,
that if somebody else touches them, it'll ruin the luck on them. There's other
it,
players that, if we're just like chatting and fooling around before a game and they roll their dice and they roll a d20 and they get a crit, so a natural 20 on the die, they will be genuinely upset because they will believe that because they wasted it rolling now, they're not going to be able to roll it later.
yeah. I when I first started playing, and maybe this is why I feel this way. When I first started playing, um, the GM at the time was Pathfinder. I didn't have a set, so he's like, "Oh, here, just use this." I'm like, "Okay, cool," and he just happened to lend me the same set every time. I think because it was easy for him to find in his bag of miscellaneous dice. It was just a plain white set with black numbering on,
Yeah.
and at that point, it never occurred to me that I need to hoard and protect my die. And I realized my full circle realization came on this the other day when we were playing, and I just left my set up on the counter just out of the way, and he had to roll a die, and he just reached over, picked up a d6, rolled it. Oh, I got this. I'm like, oh, cool. Never occurred to me that some people would find that horrifying
Yep.
that someone else touched my shit or touched my dice, rolled it, and quote stole the luck from it.
And
To me,
that was your 6 on that die that they just stole from
yeah,
you. Now you can't have it anymore.
and to me that was just a he picked it up, he rolled it, cool. You used a die that just happened to be there, like because we we often play in a big table, and so many of us are dice goblins to a varying degree.
Hmm.
It just doesn't seem to bother any of us. Oh, I forgot my dice at home. Oh, I've got to say, okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah, and generally when that happens, like, oh man, I forgot my dice. Like, well, I've got a set. I've got 2 sets. I've got one. I've got one. Here, you can have your pick of which set to use.
Yeah, and I think there's also the point where like, hey, I sell them if you want to buy a new set.
Yep.
Which was the running joke the last session when someone forgot them, and I was like, hey, this set's $7, this is 5, this is 6, this one's on
Yep.
sale,
And
and
I
you can
and
just see
I
that moment of like, maybe I do need a new pair.
and I have done that before on multiple occasions. Like, oh man, I forgot my dice, and a friend's like, well, you can borrow this set, and this is getting into why people become dice goblins. Hey, you can use this set. It's like, I don't like that color, and it doesn't really work with the character I'm using. But if I just literally turn around, there's a whole display of multiple shiny dice, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, it's like, no, they turn out, ooh, those are perfect for this. Buy them,
I
and then that's the set for that character.
I 100% agree. And ironically, since we last recorded this episode and last had this conversation, I now have two sets that work fantastically well for the clockwork. I don't know if you noticed the sets I was using. They
Oh
are
yeah.
one is white, one is blue with like it's like a black die with a white or blue inlay, and it looks like kind of clockwork swirls or mechanical swirls inside. I'm like, oh, that's going to be my clockwork die. Ironically, one was from the mystery set, one of the mystery bags I bought, and the other
Mm.
one I think my wife got me online, and they just happen to work for the character. Now, I've already mentioned that I have 3 set or 6 sets that are very similar because I lost 3. effectively rebought very similar sets and then found the other one, so whatever. But I have, again, I enjoy mystery sets. So that's going to be a weakness of mine. I'm going to end up buying more because I think it's fun to. Oh, what's in here? What's in the bag? Like, I don't need to explain the majesty of mystery sets or mystery boxes to people. You all
No.
know what I'm talking about.
And you know, even if you don't like it, generally speaking, you know, I've
You
definitely
understand
traded dice
people
sets
do.
with friends
Yeah,
or given people dice sets that I didn't like. Or it's like, hey, you know, you'll probably like this set. I'm never going to use it here.
yeah, exactly. I've got sets. I'm like, I'm not going to use this, but at the same time, I've needed the D6s that I've got.
Hmm.
So that now brings me back to the point in the show notes that is before you're stealing my luck is should you buy game specific dice sets?
So for certain games, like once again, you can just use the random number generator and plug in what you need. But certain games have special dice, like in the terms of they don't have numbers on the faces, they'll have different symbols that correspond to different things to differing degrees. Like, for example, the Alien RPG uses a standard D6 set, but they have, you know, two different colors of die, and on one of the colors of die, there's the alien symbol, which is like, you know, the bad shit's going to happen symbol. You don't need those to play. You can just use two different colors of D6, or even just one color and make sure that you roll it separately and keep it separate. But having those special die is what the game is designed around, and it's significantly easier to play with them. Something like the Genesis system has D12s, but they have clusters of symbols on each die. And like you could, you know, make a chart and go one equals these symbols, two equals these symbols, three equals these symbols. But that's just really going to slow down the play when you can just roll, count your symbols, and go.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I recall we've been playing Alien, which is a very Alien Colonial Marines. It's a very, very heavy six side or on D6s. So there's a
Yep.
just with the nature of it, you might be rolling up to 15 to 20 D6s at a time. And that's very difficult to get unless you're specifically buying a booster pack of D6s. Now,
Yeah. Or you're a war gamer.
yeah, exactly. Unless you're already gonna have that many, you may not. You may not.
Yeah, and then there's
Now,
like the World of Darkness games uses D10 pools, so similar to Aliens, but it uses the D10s instead of the D6s. Very few people will have, unless they're already playing that type of game, very few people will have like 10 plus D6 just lying around to use.
exactly, and I think that that's one of those things where yes, you can buy specific sets for a specific game, but in this case, games like Vampire the Masquerade is very heavy on D10,
Yep.
D8 maybe. I can't remember what it is. I think it's a D8. Very heavy on D8, and it's very difficult to find a D8 in general because why unless you're getting a single set which generally only has 1d8. Can you hear my cat?
I cannot know.
Okay, this is the cat that has he had a respiratory infection as a kitten, so he's got a very very weak voice, and he was just standing outside the office with the door shut, just crying very gently to be let in because he was missing me.
Aw.
Anyway, so unless you happen to have that many sets, you're not going to be able to play the game. So yes, you can buy very specific Vampire Masquerade sets, Alien stress die sets, or like you said, you can just buy a big box of stuff and correspond the numbers to different symbols.
Yeah. One of the things that I don't do it very often, but I do love to do it, is that there's stuff like, I know you guys sell them at the store too. Chessex has like, you know, the Poundo dice, which is
Oh
just
yeah,
a bag of assorted dice in random colors of random dice types. And it can be a lot of fun to just buy one of those and tear it open. Like generally, most of the dice are meh for me, but there's always a few gems in every one. And then, you know, I tend to teach not a lot of people how to play, so I can just kind of give them the dice I don't want.
That is fantastic. Yeah, it's I have been looking at those pound of dice bags, and I'm like, I kind of want that,
It's tempting,
but
isn't it?
it's so tempting. But if I'm gonna spend $40 on a bag of die, yes, it's the amount of money you get in there, or the amount of dice you get for the money is unbelievable. However, I also like my sets to be complete. Again, this is just
Yep.
me. So I recently bought again a mystery bag of ugly dice. There is not a. I think there might be. It's a regular set, so a polyhedral D20 and down set that we've been speaking about. There might be two that match in the bag, and for me, because it's a deliberately mismatched set, it's hilarious and fantastic. But it has to be kept together because if I mix it in with everything else, I'm like, wait, where's this blue or orange and purple sparkly half translucent set that I've got? Oh, I've only got two of them. Right, because it's from this cursed dice set, so they have to stay in their cursed dice bag because that's the set that it came in. The other ones you can see generally by eye. That, oh, this one goes here, this one goes here, and as I mentioned, my three similar sets are actually in two bags within my larger new dice bag. Incidentally, folks, if you're struggling with the amount of dice you have, makeup bags from Amazon are fantastic. I picked up a makeup bag uh, to use as a dice bag, like a bigger dice bag. It's great. Highly recommend it.
a lot
Um,
of a lot of people tend to use. I don't think it's as much of a thing anymore, but for a while, like every other player had a one of those like Crown Royal bags to hold all their dice in.
I have one of those at home, and I was going to use it, and I cannot find it. So yes, players do definitely use that. Uh, right. So going back to our dice sets, you can also get different types of equipment that aren't dice. Dice towers. Well, there's two things that specifically we have listed: dice towers and dice trays. I think could probably also include dice containers, but that's neither here nor there.
Mhm.
We'll start with dice towers. Do you use them? Why or why not?
Dice towers. I like having a dice tower for special
I,
roles.
I
Like I
suppose the question we should answer first is what is a dice tower?
yeah, that would help. So,
Yeah.
dice tower is. I'd say it's fairly self-explanatory, but that's coming as somebody who already knows what it is. It's generally just something that you would have sitting on the table that's fairly tall, and you would drop dice into the top of it, and it would bounce down on the way down before spitting out into a little dice tray. And it's pretty much just a way to take the actual rolling of the dice out of the player's hand and just add an extra layer of randomization to it. And you can get ones that like I've seen ones that are literally just like a cardboard box folded over. I've seen like 3D printed things that are like gorgeously detailed. I've seen ones that are like handcrafted and just ridiculous. But generally speaking, it's just a tube that has tilted platforms on the inside so the dice bounce down and around as it goes down and then it spits out into a tray at the bottom.
Which honestly, it's a great way to get truly random rolls with physical dice. One could argue, and I will argue, that dice trays are more random than a random number generator, given that a random number generator is, God, this is going to get into a technological thing, is
I was gonna
ultimately
say like
just an algorithm that isn't truly random. Like you would have more random luck throwing a dart at a board of 1 through 20 that has been just arbitrarily pinned to a wall, right? Like there is
it,
no such thing as a truly random thing, but I think a dice tray is a lot closer to that because a dice tray cannot count into effect how you shake them in your hand and then drop them down the tray and then go down. Like do you how you put it in, each person's going to do it differently. A
so
random number generator is going to be very similarly structured every time.
yeah, and it's yeah. teaching a computer to be genuinely random is very difficult,
Hmm.
veering on functionally impossible. But that's an entirely different subject.
And there's not one that we're going to cover here.
No. But yeah, so dice towers I like to use for special occasions. It is not something I would ever use as like my daily driver, just because it takes a lot longer than shaking them and rolling them by hand. It takes up more physical space. It's,
It's
visually blocks things at the table.
it does
But
allow
when
for for special occasions and things like that. It does allow for like this anticipation around the table.
exactly, like it's the type of thing that, like, if we had, like, the big roll that is either going to win the game or lose the game, you whip out the dice table tower, set it in the center, and just everybody listens as it tinks down and then spits out at the bottom.
Exactly. It's a lot of fun to use as a special occasion.
Yeah.
All right, so trays. Do you or do you not use? I know the answer to this question because I've
Yeah.
played with you enough.
At this point, they are not literally necessary, but personally, I would call them almost a necessity.
Yeah.
Because generally, especially I'm not going to say with newer players, pretty much anybody can fall into this. There's a certain category of people who are over ambitious when they roll their dice, and these dice will either fly halfway across the table or they will fly off the table, and then everybody needs to go look for these things. It's kind of bad in the shop. It's even worse when you're playing at home, and they can go under couches or
I would
under.
argue it's worse in the shop
Yeah,
because there is.
the shop has the holes in the floor.
Yeah. Now, folks, we're not saying these aren't holes where the wood has rotten away. It's actually a very structurally sound building.
Yes.
It's because it's also. I hate saying this. If you can't tell, I'm originally English from my accent. So when I say it's a very old building, I mean Canadian old, so it's like only 100-ish years old at most.
Oof.
That said, because it was built in a time when it was high quality woods being used, there were knots in the wood, and over time those knots have dried, thinned, and just generally fallen through. So the holes that Anko mentioned are very literally where there was a knot in the wood and it's just been pushed through. It is the perfect size for a D anything to fall. Well,
Yep.
maybe not a D100, but it's a perfect size for a D20 and below to fall through. And then you're like, oh, I've got to go into the basement and find it. And
Yeah,
then you're
if
looking
something's
through
fallen from that height, it's gone, and
it.
God knows where.
Yeah, there are boxes of comics down there. There are. It's not. You know when you watch Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, and you see the Ark going into this warehouse of boxes. It would be like trying to find a single dice in that. And
I
there
mean,
is
I was going to reference Storage Wars, but
that too. Yeah, that too. Like there's definitely been days when you go down and you're like, how is this even functional? Because the owner buys so many sets of comics from people and collections and things that there are times where it's just been everywhere. Ironically, now it's
he has
actually
a system,
very
but
organized. Yeah, it's very organized, and I actually can almost figure it out myself now after a few years of it being indecipherable to so many people, but him. Um, I'm not saying that in a negative thing. It's because he's the only one that goes down to the sort. He's the only one who needs to know where everything is,
yeah.
and he does. If you're looking for something, oh hey, can you find me this obscure comic number 13? Yep, comes back up in 5 minutes. Here you go. I'm like, oh,
How did you do that?
yeah, because he knows where everything is. So
Yeah.
what he doesn't know, though, is where the dice would fall when it lands in this pile of stuff. So it might be lost for years. It might never come back. It might be carried off by the little dice goblins in the basement.
Like, as much as, like, the worst thing that can possibly happen to me with dice is losing one dice out of losing a single die out of a set, I will not use the entire set again, just because it bothers me enough that there's one mismatched die in there.
But I would
But, like,
also not throw the set out in case I find that motherfucker.
exactly. But, like, if if a die drops through that hole, it's gone. I'm not.
Yeah,
It would take days of digging to find that thing. I'm not
and the
going to look
rest.
for that.
No, exactly. So going back to what we were saying, it's
Dice
dice
tray.
trays are very essential in terms of curbing the enthusiasm of potential dice rollers in that
Yeah.
you can throw it in this thing. You don't. It's almost like because it's a tray, you don't throw it as hard because you know it's got to stay in that tray,
Now,
right?
I have definitely, both myself and seen it in other people, still been a little too ambitious with my throw and have it
Hmm.
bounce out of the dice tray and off of the table.
Yeah.
But like in terms of reducing the number of off-table incidences, 100% worth it.
Oh, agreed. Now I think there was one roll in the last session where I was rolling and it fell out of my hand and landed on the floor, and it just happened to be like flat in the middle of everything. I'm like, I'm gonna keep that because it's a. I think I needed to roll. I think it was like I rolled 4 on a d6. I'm like, what? I'm gonna keep that. No one's gonna be upset if I say I got a 4 and it's on the floor, or
Yeah.
it's I got a 6 or I got a 1.
Now, generally speaking, I do tend to, when I'm running, stick to the rule of if it rolls out of your designated area,
Yeah,
it doesn't count. Just because I've had to, like I said, I tend to teach a lot of new players,
and
and
then you
I've
got to
had
go
some,
digging for them.
yeah, and I've had some very, very aggressive rollers that will hunt around like nobody touch it. It's this on the floor. It's like I don't care. You rolled it off the table.
Yeah,
You're gonna pick it up and
and
re-roll it and do better next time.
honestly, that would have like the amount of times I've dropped them and just picked them up and re-rolled because it just happened to land at my feet and like, you know what? It's a 4. Yep, good enough. It's flat in the middle of everything. Had it been like anything else other than a 3 or a 4, I probably would have picked it up and re-rolled for that
Mm.
very reason. It's just one of those things where I've dropped it more times trying to put it back in the bag than I have anything else. Because I also use a makeshift dice tray when I'm at the store counter between a comic box and a couple of other things that just happen to be on a counter at a time. I throw it into that so it bounces back.
Yeah, and like
It,
space is kind of at a premium on that counter to begin with.
exactly. Ironically enough, it's worse since we got those mystery dice sets, but the back of that makes a fantastic thing to bounce your dice off. So I'm not going to complain. Um, okay, so dice trays are fantastic for curbing enthusiasm, and you have touched on this when it comes to common table rules with dice. If it comes off the table, you re-roll it.
Yes, that is the major one that I institute whenever I'm playing pretty much
Yep.
anywhere for the aforementioned reasons.
The
One of the other ones that as a GM I frequently institute because I'm not going to say it curbs. No, yeah, I'm going to say it curbs bad player behavior. Is if you roll either without me telling you you need to roll or without telling me what you're rolling for, I don't care what it was. I'm not paying attention to it
Yeah,
because I have.
that's entirely fair. Like I think now I am one to bend that because I'll often, if I know I have a roll coming up. So, for example, my clockwork in the last session, and my cat's knocking stuff over. My clockwork in the last session, I knew I had to roll a death saving roll, and I rolled a 1. But I did that before I needed to because I then had to go put stuff on the counter. And you're like, oh, you
Yeah,
need to do this. I'm like, yeah, I re-rolled it. It was a 1, and someone else just happened. Like, no, he did. It was a 1.
yeah, and
So I'm
like
like,
that's a special, like, that's kind of a special circumstance because A, I trust you to not really fuck with it. B, you only have one thing you really can be rolling for in that situation.
mm-hmm,
Like your character's not going to be making an attack roll; they're down. Literally, the only thing they can roll is the death saving throw.
yeah.
But
However,
I've definitely, because I do it myself. When you're bored and waiting for your turn, you're just rolling dice to keep your hands occupied, which is another benefit of the dice trays. They're frequently felt on the bottom. They take a
mm-hmm.
lot of the noise out of that, so they're less distracting for other players. But I've had players that they'll roll and then they'll suddenly get a really good number. It's like, oh, that was my roll for this. Like, no, it wasn't.
No, you're very clearly messing around. Now, I have rolled when I know what I'm going to do. I have rolled in advance and just left the die on the table because I'm then trying to work and get stuff done. I need the space.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. It's not something I need to do often. Now, when given the nature of playing on a table, if or even in a dice tray, what do you do with a cock die? Now, a cock die being one that doesn't fully land when
So
it's tied up.
how I tend to run it is if it's like lightly cocked and there's clearly like a predominant flat side, we'll just go with that. Like that tends to happen with one of our players because he does have a dice tray, but he's also a little ambitious with his dice, and so they'll frequently end up like up against the side of the tray and be a bit cocked for that. If if the die like predominantly looks like a seven, then it's like okay, we're gonna call that a seven and move on. But if it's at all unclear, like if anybody could look at that and go, but it might be this one, then you just re-roll the die because there's no point in spending a bunch of time arguing about whether it's number A or number B when we can just generate a new number in like 2 seconds.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like it's one of those things where generally cock die you want to re-roll, but if it's very minimal, whatever.
Yeah, and generally speaking, like if a player like rolls a die and it's clearly cocked, they don't need to wait for me to say, yeah, no, it's cocked. You can re-roll it.
Yeah,
But you know, in the times where it might be flat enough for it to be a number, that's generally when they'll reach out to be like, hey, this is cocked. Do you want me to re-roll this one? But if it's cocked bad enough, that it's like an edge that's pointing straight up, then they don't need to ask me about that. It's just, oh yeah, that's clearly cocked. It can't be read as any one number clearly. Just grab it and re-roll it.
yeah, exactly. This is going to happen one way or another. You may as well just redo it now.
Yeah. And if you can't trust the people you're playing with, you shouldn't be playing with them.
Exactly, and that's just it. Like I think for the most part, when it comes down to re-rolling a cock die, like we all know that realistically, it's not really the 20 that you want it to be, or it's not really the like that's why things are re-rolled. It's not really the number you want it to be so desperately. It just happens to look like that, and the sooner you come to the sorry, my cat knocked a whole bunch of stuff down. I'm just putting it back up. So if you hear rustling, that's what it is. It's just one of those things where it just so happens to be that this is what you're going to have to do. It isn't the end of the world to have to do it. It's one of those things. Like it's not absolutely not the end of the world. Will you settle down?
Just so happy to be there.
Ironically enough, he is. He found a new. Oh, I can get up here. What's in here?
Oh no.
So, yeah, he's going to knock it down again down the road, but that's fine,
Yeah. Beauty of cat ownership.
right? Like again, this is a complete tangent. The amount of collectibles I have, like action figures on a shelf, and I've been in meetings for work with a camera on, and people see, oh, that's so cool. Look at all that stuff. And then they see my cat walking through it and knocking everything over, like, he's gonna break. I'm like, yeah. Like it's at the end of the day, these are things that are easily replaceable, and this is his house. And if I choose to have them in his way, well, that's my fault.
Yeah, there's a reason I keep most of my gunpla like in glass display cabinets where the cats
Exactly.
functionally can't get to them because like, hey, I spent like $50+ on this and 20+ hours building it. No, I don't want my cat destroying it. Thanks.
Exactly. Like a lot of these things I did not spend that much money on, and I do not like that much money or time on, and I have them to play around with, repos, whatever. And if he knocks it over, well, they're not going to break,
Yeah.
right? Like it's not like a gunpla where if your cat knocks it over, it's going to it's going to have a very good chance of
Yeah.
falling apart. So
There,
um
there's a reason some are called hand grenades.
yeah, yeah. So speaking of things that break as they fall over, things that this is a really bad segue. Uh, the last point we have to talk about is cheater dice, or specifically weighted dice.
Yeah. So the most predominant form, cheater dice predominantly come in two forms. And actually, you know what? We've had this discussion before. Do you remember what those two forms are?
Oh, ones that are specifically weighted to land more often with your preferred number at the top.
Mm-hmm.
So then maybe they have a heavier weight towards the bottom, not unlike with glass falling down to the bottom apparently. And I think the other one was where the numbers are out of order, so it's more likely you're going to get a high number. So instead of it being a typical D6, you might have the high numbers on one side.
So close, but actually brings up something fun that we can touch back on the earlier
Ooh.
subject about myths and stuff. There's two in the nerd space. There's generally two types of D20. There's the RPG D20s, and then there's the countdown D20s that are used by like Magic the Gathering. Because like in those games, you have these countdown D20s. I don't know if they're still super common anymore, but back when I was playing Magic the Gathering, you would have these D20s that the numbers would be set so you could just tick one face at a time to count up and down your life. So like the numbers would be so you could just move the die one face at a time to go 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, da 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 da. And there's certain RPG players who absolutely despise these because, if the weight on these die are off, it's going to very heavily favor, you know, landing either on high numbers or low numbers, because all the high numbers and low numbers are clustered on each side of the die,
Mm-hmm.
while rolling dice tend to be deliberate about having the numbers on opposing faces. Like the 20 will be on the opposite side of the 1, the 19 will be on the opposite side of the 2, so on and so forth, and they'll be arranged so everything is kind of scattered out. The like you mentioned before, the weighted die tend to have like either a heavier weight on the 1 face or a lighter weight on the 20 face, or both, which just, when you're rolling, gravity will tend to more often than not pull that 1 face to the bottom, which will leave the 20 face on top. The other method is not quite so much faces out of order as it is just outright replacing some of those faces.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of having the 20 and the 1 on opposite sides, you would have a 20 and another 20 on the opposite sides. And because they're on the opposite side of each other, unless you're somebody who is very well aware of what the standard, number layout is, or you're paying close attention, you're never really going to notice that there's two 20s on this D20.
Yeah. No, exactly. And so just anecdote time.
Mm-hmm.
The last session we had, I just happened to be rolling well. Again, this is one of those things where it really is just pure luck with how the dice are landing.
Yeah.
I just happened to be rolling well, and one of our players who was in the shop but had arrived really late from work, so wasn't playing that session, like just happened to be watching, and he picked up a couple of times and rolled the same die, and they just got different numbers. He's like, oh, you really just are rolling well, and they're not weighted. And I was like, I said, yeah. He said, I'm not accusing you of having weighted dice because I know you bought them here. I just was curious to see if they were actually weighted that
Yeah,
you didn't,
because
right?
there's like very few die, unless you're paying specifically for this. Very few die are perfectly evenly weighted the entire way through.
Yeah.
And going back to superstitions and stuff, there are players who will go through a lot of work to try to find the die that are ever so slightly either weighted in the way they prefer or are as perfectly balanced as is like mechanically possible.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, unless you're deliberately getting either very shoddy or cheat dice, there will be slight differences in the weight, but it is so minuscule as to be statistically irrelevant.
And that's just it. Like I've definitely been fortunate with some of the roles that I've had, and I've definitely been unfortunate. And my friend actually deliberately tried. He has a 3D printer, and he decided I'm going to see if I can print weighted dice.
Yeah.
He did. They're ugly as hell, and they are light and about, I would say they're about twice as big as they need to be for a D6.
Yeah.
Right? They're just. He said they don't really roll well. He said honestly, I rolled them enough. I know they're weighted, and I couldn't really tell that they're weighted. He said they're not weighted enough. So like he was doing it just out of an experiment. Like he knows they're weighted. He doesn't use them for that because they are
And
really
that's
bad. But
from like a design perspective, that's the that's the difficulty with making like properly weighted dice, is they need to be weighted enough to actually, have an effect. But the more weighted they are, the weirder they're going to roll, and the more obvious it is that they're weighted. So like if you throw a D6 and it goes clunk clunk and then immediately sits down on the highest face, then it's pretty bloody obvious.
Like
But
unless you're flipping it like a coin where it spins in the air and lands, even then it should have a couple of bounces.
Exactly. And it's just weighted dice, because like I've only actually had like in hand a couple of times actual like weighted die. Like they had like a bit of metal inserted in one side, because the metal's a lot heavier than the plastic.
Mm-hmm.
They had a little bit of metal inserted on one side to pull the weight to that side. And like you can feel the difference, and you can see the difference when you roll them if you're paying attention for it. And like it's just, the more weighted they are, the more obvious they are. But the less weighted they are, the less they're going to affect things. And like some people just want that, they don't want to get the 6 every time. They just want that slight edge where it's like, if for like the mismatching faces, if you have a 20 on one side and a 20 instead of a 1 on the other side, that's doubling your chances of getting a 20 on your die. But that's only, that's just 2 out of, that's just 1 out of 10 instead of 1 out of 20. You're still not likely to get a 20 every time you roll.
No, and honestly, that to me, all it really does is remove a chance for a crit failure. Now, we've talked about crit failures before, folks. It's when it hits a 1 on the dice, and it doesn't matter what your other scores are. At that point, you are well and truly screwed. It's why there's the running joke of, well, I guess I rolled a 1 on that in certain circles in life. Like you're going to see shirts and things with a D20 with it clearly showing a 1. And this is ironically actually that I think our final thought, because we don't have any other notes after this. I find that when you roll and there is a genuine chance of a crit failure, it provides hilarious results.
I've definitely played systems where they took crit failures to very unfun lengths, but you can have a lot of fun with a crit failure.
And honestly, and again, like we will talk about this in episode 9, where there are ways to mitigate that with action points, etc. Where maybe if you do a crit failure, you have a chance to roll again. You may not roll well, but you do have that chance to re-roll again depending on the system. So I don't know how long this episode has been, because we are, as has been previously mentioned, recording this the same day as another one, and we just use the same recording session. So I think we're at about 44-ish minutes, give or take. I don't know. I really don't know. Folks, we have hit the last of our table points. We have also hit about the time where our available time has come up. So until and I say until next episode, the next episodes have been recorded. So until episode 10,
game on.
Hey, thanks for watching Board Game today. We always appreciate your views and your support, but there are so many ways for you to support our site. Not only can you do it right here on video, but you can go and check us out at boardgametoday.com, where we have more news, reviews, interviews, everything you could ever want. But since you're here, if you can always give us a like, subscribe, or share our videos, or watch something else. Is always much appreciated, and get your game on.